"You're not ugly. You just need a chance and marry me," he said to the homeless woman. Sarah Anderson never imagined her life could change completely on an ordinary Thursday morning. For 2 years, she had been living on the streets of New York City, sleeping under awnings, and surviving on the kindness of strangers who sometimes gave her a few dollars or a piece of bread. That's when David Sterling, a 35-year-old businessman, knelt before her in Union Square and said the words that would echo in her mind for days. "You're not ugly. You just need a chance. Marry me." Sarah covered her face with trembling hands, feeling tears stream between her dirty fingers. How could this well-dressed man, in an impeccable suit and shiny shoes, be serious? She looked around and realized dozens of people had stopped to watch the unusual scene. "You're making fun of me," she murmured, unable to lift her eyes. "I've never been more serious in my life," replied David, holding a small black velvet box. "I've been watching you for months. I've seen how you care for the stray dogs here in the square, how you share your food with them, even when you barely have enough for yourself." Sarah felt her chest tighten. Those dogs had been her only company for so long. She really did share her meager food with them, and always made sure they were protected from the cold and rain before thinking of herself. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered, still covering her face. "You don't even know me." "I know enough to know you have a kind heart," said David, moving a little closer. "I saw you comforting a lost child last week. I saw you sharing your blanket with an elderly lady during that cold January night." David's words left her even more confused. How did he know all this? Why would a man like him pay attention to someone like her? "Please, give me a chance to explain," he continued. "I know it seems crazy, but You'd better leave," interrupted Sarah, standing up abruptly and gathering her few belongings. "People are filming. This will cause trouble for you." And before David could say another word, she ran off through the curious passers-by, leaving behind the man kneeling on the cold ground of the square, still holding the ring box. David stayed there for a few minutes, absorbing what had just happened. The people around began to disperse, some murmuring comments about the bizarre scene they had just witnessed. He put the box in his pocket and left the square, determined to find her again. That same afternoon, videos of the unusual proposal were already circulating on social media. "Businessman proposes to homeless woman," read one of the headlines. Comments ranged from romantic support to harsh criticism, with many people questioning David's true intentions. Sarah had taken refuge in a homeless shelter on the outskirts of the city, a place she knew but avoided because of the strict rules and overcrowding. Sitting on one of the cramped bunk beds, she couldn't get the sincere expression on David's face when he proposed out of her mind. "Are you all right, dear?" asked Martha, a 68-year-old woman who had been running the shelter for over a decade. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something strange happened today," murmured Sarah, not going into details. "Do you want to talk about it?" offered Martha, sitting on the bed beside her. Sarah hesitated. Martha had always been kind to her the few times she had stayed at the shelter, but how could she explain something she herself didn't understand? "A man asked me to marry him," she finally said. Martha raised her eyebrows, surprised. "Someone you've known for a long time?" "No, a stranger. A well-dressed businessman who said he had been watching me for months." "That sounds dangerous, dear," said Martha, concern in her voice. "You need to be careful with that kind of situation. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing." Sarah spent the whole night awake, turning over in her head every word David had said. The next morning, she decided to return to Union Square, not because she wanted to see him again, but because she needed to care for the dogs she had left behind in her hasty escape. When she reached the square, she found David sitting on the same bench where she used to spend her mornings. Seeing her, he stood up immediately but did not approach, respecting her space. "You came back," he said, a mix of relief and surprise in his voice. "I came for the dogs," replied Sarah, heading toward the small group of strays that ran toward her as soon as they saw her. David watched in silence as she distributed pieces of bread she had gotten from the homeless shelter and checked the animals for injuries. The dedication and affection with which she treated the dogs touched him deeply. "May I come closer?" he asked after a few minutes. Sarah nodded, still focused on caring for the animals. I want to explain what happened yesterday, said David, maintaining a respectful distance. I know it seems crazy, but— Why? She interrupted. Why would you do something like that? David took a deep breath before answering. My whole life has been built around business, money, professional success, he began. But in the last few months, seeing you here every day, I realized I had never met anyone with so much love in their heart. You don't know me, replied Sarah, still not looking directly at him. You're right, I don't know your story, admitted David. But I know your actions. I saw you take food from your own mouth to feed these dogs. I saw you protect a lost child until her parents arrived. I saw you share your only blanket with a stranger, an elderly lady. Sarah finally raised her eyes to meet his. And that made you think about marriage? That made me realize you possess something I've never had, said David. Genuine compassion, unconditional love. Unconditional love doesn't pay bills or put food on the table, murmured Sarah, turning her attention back to the dogs. But it makes life worth living, replied David. I have enough money for 2 lifetimes, but what difference does it make if I have no one to share it with? Sarah remained silent for a long time, processing his words. Finally, she stood up and faced him directly. You know nothing about me, she said. You don't know where I came from, why I'm here, what mistakes I've made. Then tell me, asked David. Give me a chance to know you. It's not that simple. Why not? Sarah hesitated. For 2 years, she had avoided talking about her past with anyone. It was easier to be seen as just another homeless person than to explain the sequence of events that had brought her there. Because some stories are too painful to tell, she said finally. All worthwhile stories are painful, replied David. That's what makes them precious. Sarah studied him for a moment, looking for signs of falseness or hidden agenda in his expression. All she found was sincerity and a patience that disarmed her. If I agree to talk to you, she said slowly, it has to be on my terms, at my pace. Of course, David agreed immediately. And no expensive gifts or grand gestures. That just makes me uncomfortable. Understood. And most importantly, no pity. I can't stand it when people look at me with pity. I never felt sorry for you, said David with conviction. Admiration, yes. Pity, never. Sarah nodded slowly. There's a diner right there on the corner, she said, pointing. If you really want to talk, meet me there tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. I'll be there, promised David. The next day, David arrived at the diner promptly at 2. Sarah was already there, sitting at a table in the back, with a half-finished cup of coffee in front of her. She had managed to take a shower at the homeless shelter and was wearing clean clothes, though still worn by time and use. Thank you for coming, said David, sitting down across from her. I spent the whole night thinking about whether I should show up, admitted Sarah. And what made you change your mind? Curiosity, I guess. She took a sip of coffee. It's been a long time since anyone showed genuine interest in getting to know me. David ordered a coffee for himself and stayed quiet, waiting for her to feel comfortable enough to start talking. You said you've been watching me for months, Sarah finally said. Why? The first time I saw you was about 6 months ago, began David. I was coming back from a frustrating business meeting, thinking about how empty my life was despite all my professional success. He paused, remembering the moment. I saw you sharing a sandwich with 3 different dogs, and I thought, when was the last time I shared anything with anyone without expecting something in return? And that caught your attention? Asked Sarah, skeptical. It made me reflect, corrected David. I started noticing you whenever I passed by here. I saw how you interacted with the other homeless people, how you cared for the animals, how you never lost your dignity, even in the worst circumstances. Sarah looked down at her coffee. Dignity is all I have left. That's not true, said David softly. You have much more than that. You have kindness, strength, resilience. I have a daughter too, interrupted Sarah, surprising both herself and David. The silence that followed was heavy and loaded with meaning. A daughter, repeated David, trying to process the information. Sarah nodded without raising her eyes. Natalie, she's 16 now. I haven't seen her in 2 years. What happened? I lost custody when I lost the house, the job, the stability. When I lost everything. David waited patiently for her to continue, sensing he was entering painful territory. Natalie lives with her father now, continued Sarah, her voice almost a whisper. He managed to prove in court that I wasn't in a condition to take care of her. And were you? At the time, probably not, admitted Sarah. I was drinking too much, depressed, lost. I couldn't even take care of myself, let alone a teenager. And now? Now, I've been sober for 1 year and 4 months, she said, finally raising her eyes to meet his. But I don't know if that changes anything. David leaned forward in his chair. Do you try to have contact with her? Her father doesn't allow it. He says it's better for Natalie to think her mother disappeared than to know she's living on the streets. That must be very hard. It's the worst part of everything, admitted Sarah, and David could see tears forming in her eyes. I wake up every day thinking about her, wondering if she's okay, if she's happy, if she misses me. She probably does, said David kindly. I don't know. When I lost custody, she was very hurt by me. She said I had chosen the drink over her. And was she right? Sarah hesitated before answering. Partly, yes. When I found out my husband was having an affair, I fell apart. Instead of fighting for my family, I gave myself over to alcohol. What else happened? I lost my job because I missed too many days. Then I lost the house because I couldn't pay the mortgage on my own. The divorce process was a war, and in the end, he got everything. Our daughter, the house, my dignity. David Sterling fell silent for a moment, absorbing the pain in her voice. And how did you end up on the streets? First, I stayed at a few friends' places, but I couldn't take advantage of their kindness forever, explained Sarah Anderson. I tried to rent a small room, but without a job or references, no one would take me. The money from the divorce ran out quickly, paying the lawyer and trying to get back on my feet. Couldn't your family help? My parents died when I was young. I have no siblings. The friendships fell apart when my life turned upside down. She shrugged. People have their own lives, their own problems. And how did you survive on the streets? At first it was terrible, admitted Sarah. I was afraid of everything and everyone. But I learned there are good people everywhere. Martha from the homeless shelter taught me a lot about how to protect myself and where to find help. Was she the one who helped you get sober? Partly, but the decision was mine, said Sarah firmly. I realized that if I wanted any chance of getting my daughter back someday, I needed to get myself back first. David was impressed by the strength and determination she showed, despite all the adversity. And what did you do before all this happened? I was an English teacher at a private school, said Sarah, and for the first time since they started talking, David saw a flicker of pride in her eyes. I loved teaching, especially literature. Seeing the students fall in love with a book, discovering new worlds through words. You must miss it. I do. Sometimes I get some books from the public library and read to anyone who wants to listen here in the square. She smiled timidly. The dogs are a very attentive audience. David couldn't help but smile too. Now I understand even more why I fell in love with you. Don't use that word, said Sarah quickly. You don't know me well enough to talk about love. You're right, admitted David. But I fell for the person I see every day. For the woman who finds time to care for abandoned creatures, even when she barely has enough for herself. That's not love, David. It's admiration. Maybe, but it's a start, isn't it? Sarah studied him for a long moment. Why would you do this? Why would you get involved with someone who can only bring problems into your life? Because problems are what make life worth living, replied David, and because I believe you can bring much more than problems. Like what, for example? Purpose, meaning, a different perspective on what really matters in life. Sarah shook her head. You have a very romantic view of poverty and suffering. It's not about romanticizing anything, said David. It's about recognizing strength and character when I see it. And if I agree to give you a chance? asked Sarah hesitantly. What if we find out we're not compatible? What if your family and friends don't accept me? One thing at a time, said David. How about we start as friends and see where it leads? Friends, repeated Sarah, testing the word. It's been a long time since I've had a real friend. So, shall we try? Sarah took a deep breath. There are some things you need to know first. I'm listening. I won't move into your house or accept your money, she said firmly. If we're going to try to be friends, it has to be on equal terms. What do you mean? We'll meet in neutral places. I'll stay at the shelter until I get a job and a place of my own. I don't want to be seen as someone who's with you for what I can get. David nodded. I understand, and I respect that. And there's something else, Sarah continued. If this works out between us, I want to try to get my daughter back. That is non-negotiable for me. Of course. Actually, I'd like to help with that, if you'll let me. How? I can pay for a lawyer who specializes in custody cases. No strings attached, just as one friend helping another. Sarah hesitated. I don't know if it would be right to accept. Think of it as an investment in the future, suggested David. If you can get your daughter back and rebuild your life, you'll have a better chance at being happy. And I want you to be happy. Why? Because people like you deserve to be happy, David said simply. Because you've already suffered too much. Sarah felt tears threatening to appear again. You don't even really know me, and you already want to help me get my daughter back? I know enough to know that a mother who shares food with stray dogs can't be a bad mother, replied David. The circumstances may have been difficult, but that doesn't change who you are deep down. What if you regret it? What if you find out it doesn't really work that way? Then at least we will have tried, said David. I can't live with the doubt of what could have been. Sarah was silent for several minutes, watching the street activity through the diner window. Okay, she said finally. Let's try to be friends, but slowly at my pace. Deal, smiled David. And you tell me about your life too. I want to know who David Sterling is beyond the successful businessman who proposes to strange women. David laughed. Fair enough. Well, to start, I'm the typical workaholic who discovered too late that financial success isn't synonymous with happiness. Go on. I'm 35, never been married, because I never found someone who made me want to stop working long enough to build a serious relationship. And your family? My mother, Mrs. Margaret, and my sister, Jennifer. They're both going to have a fit when they find out about you. Why? Because they're very traditional. They expected me to marry someone from the same social circle with a graduate degree and a well-established family. Then maybe we shouldn't tell them yet, suggested Sarah. Eventually we'll have to tell them, said David. But there's no rush. They continued talking for another 2 hours, sharing stories and discovering small compatibilities. David was impressed by Sarah's intelligence and humor, qualities that managed to shine even through all the pain and hardship she had faced. When they said goodbye, they agreed to meet again the next day, at the same place and time. David, Sarah called as he was already leaving. Yes? Thank you for listening to me. It's been a long time since someone took a genuine interest in my story. Thank you for trusting me, he replied. During the following weeks, David and Sarah developed a routine. They met every day at the diner, talked for hours, and then David would walk her to the homeless shelter. Slowly, she began to open up more, sharing details about her life before the streets, her dreams of getting her daughter back, and her fears about the future. David, in turn, discovered a new perspective on life through Sarah's eyes. He began to question his priorities and rethink what really mattered to him. Have you ever tried to contact Natalie directly? David asked during one of their conversations. How? Replied Sarah. I don't have a phone. I don't know where she goes to school. I don't even know if she still lives at the same address. I can help find that information, offered David. I don't know. What if she doesn't want to talk to me? What if she does? You won't know until you try. Sarah considered the suggestion for a few days before accepting. David discreetly hired a private detective to locate Natalie, discovering that she was attending a public school not far from where they used to live. Is she okay? Was Sarah's first question when David brought the information. According to what we were able to find out, yes. Good grades, doesn't get into trouble. Lives with her father in a rented apartment. A rented apartment? Sarah seemed surprised. But he kept the house. It appears he sold the house about a year ago. The detective couldn't find out why. Strange, that house was the pride of his life. David hesitated before sharing the next piece of information. There's one more thing. Natalie works part-time at a clothing store on Saturdays. She works? Sarah was alarmed. But she's only 16. It's legal, with a proper work permit. It seems she needs to help with the household expenses. This doesn't make sense, murmured Sarah. Robert earned very well. Why would a teenager need to work to help at home? Do you want me to investigate further? Asked David. Yes, please. If my daughter is in financial difficulty, we'll find out what's going on, David assured her. 2 weeks later, David brought information that left Sarah shocked. Robert had lost his job 8 months ago and was struggling to find a new position. Furthermore, he had accumulated considerable debt, which explained the sale of the house and the move to a smaller apartment. My daughter is in need, said Sarah, with tears in her eyes. Meanwhile, I didn't even know where she was. Now you know, said David gently, and you can do something about it. How? I don't even have a job. But I have resources, David reminded her. I can help financially until you can get back on your feet. I can't accept your money for my daughter, Sarah protested. Why not? Because it's not right. You barely know me. I've known you for 2 months, said David. And in these 2 months, I've learned more about character and kindness than in my entire previous life. Sarah fell silent, processing the information. And if I accept your help, and then things don't work out between us, how will I pay you back? Then it won't be a loan, said David. It will be a gift, a way to help a mother who wants the best for her daughter. David, listen, he interrupted. I'm not doing this to impress you or to create an obligation between us. I'm doing it because I believe Natalie deserves to have her mother back in her life. But what if she doesn't want to? There's only one way to find out. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. After much hesitation, Sarah agreed to let David help. He arranged for a lawyer specializing in family law and began discreetly sending money to cover some of Natalie's expenses, making it appear to come from a social assistance program so that neither she nor Robert would know the true source of the funds. Now we need to work on your situation, said David. You need to have stable conditions to try to regain custody. I'm looking for a job, said Sarah. But it's hard to get anything without a fixed address and with 2 years of blank resume. What if you went back to private tutoring, suggested David. You could start slowly, a few students, and build a reputation. I'm no longer registered with the State Education Board, explained Sarah. And my professional reputation was destroyed when I lost my job. We can work to rebuild that too, said David. I know people in the education sector. I can get some referrals. You would do that for me? I would do anything to help you get your daughter back, David replied sincerely. In the following months, with David's help, Sarah slowly began to rebuild her life. She managed to get a few students for private tutoring, moved from the homeless shelter to a small rented room, and began the legal procedures to try to revisit the custody case for Natalie. Throughout this period, her friendship with David deepened. They spent even more time together, and Sarah began to realize her feelings for him were evolving beyond gratitude and friendship. There's something I need to tell you, said David one afternoon as they walked through the square where they had met. What is it? My family found out about us. Sarah stopped walking. How? My sister saw me with you last week. She followed us here and, well, it wasn't hard for her to find out who you are. And how did they react? David hesitated. Not very well, to be honest. My mother wants to meet you. To size me up, you mean? Probably. Sarah sighed. David, maybe it's better. No, he interrupted. We're not giving up now. Not after all the progress we've made. Your family will never accept me, said Sarah, and I can't blame them. If I had a son, I'd be worried too if he showed up with someone like me. Someone like you? David seemed offended. Someone brave, resilient, kind. Someone who lived on the streets, David. Someone who lost custody of her own daughter. Someone who is fighting to rebuild her life and get her family back, corrected David. That should be a reason for admiration, not prejudice. It should be, but that's not how the world works. David took her hands. Then let's show them how the world can work. Come to dinner at my house on Sunday. Just you, me, my mother, and my sister. David, I don't know if that's a good idea. Trust me, he asked, and most of all, trust yourself. The following Sunday, Sarah dressed in the best dress she owned, a gift David had insisted on giving her, and made her way to David's house, located in the Upper East Side. The house was even more impressive than she had imagined, an elegant townhouse with a well-kept garden and an electronic gate. Sarah took a deep breath before ringing the bell. David greeted her personally, wearing casual but elegant clothes. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing her cheek. "I'm nervous," admitted Sarah. "It's going to be okay," David assured her, taking her hand. Mrs. Margaret, David's mother, was a 62-year-old woman with impeccably styled gray hair and a formal dress that probably cost more than Sarah made in a month. His sister Jennifer, 32, was equally well-dressed and made up. "Mother Jennifer, this is Sarah," David introduced. "Pleased to meet you," said Mrs. Margaret, extending a cold hand to greet her. "Hi," said Jennifer, barely looking in Sarah's direction. The dinner proceeded in a tense and uncomfortable atmosphere. Mrs. Margaret asked polite but clearly investigative questions about Sarah's past, while Jennifer barely disguised her disapproval. "And you said you were a teacher?" asked Mrs. Margaret. "I am," corrected Sarah. "I do private tutoring now." "Ah, yes, and before that?" "I worked at a private school. I taught American literature to high school students." "Interesting," said Mrs. Margaret, though her tone suggested otherwise. "And your family?" "I don't have a family," Sarah replied simply. "What do you mean, no family?" asked Jennifer, finally inserting herself into the conversation. Sarah felt her face grow warm. "My parents died when I was young. I have no siblings." "And children?" asked Mrs. Margaret. David quickly intervened. "Mother, how about we change the subject?" "No, it's all right," said Sarah. "I have a daughter, Natalie. She's 16. "And where does she live?" asked Jennifer with a mean-spirited smile. "With her father," replied Sarah, trying to maintain her composure. "Oh, they're separated," observed Mrs. Margaret. "How long ago?" "A few years." "And why don't you live together? Mother and daughter, I mean." Sarah felt cornered. She looked at David, who seemed equally uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "It's complicated," she finally said. "It's fine. We don't need to go into details," said Mrs. Margaret, but her smile was cold and calculated. The rest of the dinner passed in relative silence, broken only by polite comments about the food and the weather. When it was time to leave, Sarah said her goodbyes politely and left with David. "I told you it wouldn't work," Sarah said as soon as they left the house. "They just need time to get to know you better," said David, but his voice didn't sound very convincing. "David, they hate me, and I can't blame them." "They don't hate you. They're just surprised." "Surprised is an understatement. Your sister barely looked me in the face, and your mother interrogated me like I was a criminal." "They'll get used to it," insisted David. But deep down, they both knew the evening had been a disaster. The next morning, David received a call from his mother, asking to speak with him alone. When he arrived at her house, he found both Mrs. Margaret and Jennifer waiting for him in the living room. "We need to talk," said Mrs. Margaret without preamble. "If it's about Sarah, I don't want to hear it," said David. "David, be sensible," said Jennifer. "That woman is clearly after your money." "You don't even know her." "We know enough," replied Mrs. Margaret. "A woman who lost custody of her own daughter, who lived on the streets, who has no family or stability, a woman who is fighting to rebuild her life," interrupted David. "Listen," said Jennifer. "I hired a detective to investigate her." David was furious. "You did what?" "It was necessary," said Mrs. Margaret, "and what we found is not good at all." Jennifer took a folder of papers from a drawer. She was admitted 3 times to rehabilitation clinics for alcoholics. She began to read. Lost her job due to excessive absences related to alcohol. Had several public arguments with her ex-husband, including one where she physically assaulted him in front of their daughter. David felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. That can't be true. These are official documents, said Jennifer, handing the papers to him. David took the documents with trembling hands. There were all the sordid details Sarah had omitted from her story, the admissions, the fights, the physical violence. She lied to you, son, said Mrs. Margaret gently, omitted the worst parts of her history. Maybe she was ashamed, murmured David, still trying to process the information. Or maybe she's a skilled manipulator, suggested Jennifer. David, think about it. What kind of woman loses custody of her own daughter? What kind of mother assaults the child's father in front of her? David couldn't answer. Everything he thought he knew about Sarah was being questioned. What do you want me to do? He asked finally. Break up with her, said Mrs. Margaret, before it's too late. And if I don't want to? Then you'll be on your own, said Jennifer coldly, because we won't stand by and watch you destroy your life over a con artist. She is not a con artist, protested David, but his voice sounded uncertain. Prove it, challenged Jennifer. David left his mother's house more confused than ever. The whole way to meet Sarah, he kept turning over the documents he had read in his head. How could she omit such important information? When he arrived at the diner where they always met, Sarah was already waiting for him. As soon as she saw him enter, she knew something was wrong. What is it? She asked. David sat down across from her and placed the folder of documents on the table. I need you to explain this to me. Sarah opened the folder and paled at the contents. Where did you get this? She asked in a weak voice. My sister hired a private investigator. She did what? Sarah, you lied to me, said David, trying to control the anger in his voice. I didn't lie. I omitted. It's the same thing. It's not, exclaimed Sarah, drawing curious looks from the other customers. It's not the same thing because I knew if I told you everything from the start, you'd run away. Maybe I should have, murmured David. The words cut Sarah like a blade. Is that what you think of me now? She asked, tears in her eyes. David ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. I don't know what to think anymore. You told me you lost custody because you were drinking and depressed. You didn't mention the hospitalizations, the outbursts, the public fights. Because I was ashamed, whispered Sarah. Because I knew if you knew everything, I deserved to know the truth from the beginning. And I deserved a chance to show I've changed, Sarah shot back. How can I know if you really have? How can I trust you after this? Sarah was silent for a long moment. You can't, she said finally. Trust is a choice, and apparently you chose to believe your family over believing me. They have documents, Sarah, evidence, and I have the last 2 years of my life as evidence that I've changed, she said, rising from the table. But if that's not enough for you, then maybe your family is right. Sarah, wait. No, she said, gathering her belongings. Your family won. You can go back to your perfect, orderly life without worrying about the problems of a former alcoholic who lived on the streets. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, Sarah interrupted. And you know what? They're right. You deserve someone better than me. And before David could answer, she walked out of the diner, leaving him alone with the documents and a terrible feeling of emptiness in his chest. During the following weeks, David tried several times to contact Sarah, but she had disappeared. She was no longer at the homeless shelter. She didn't show up at the square where they used to meet, and no one knew where she might be. It's for the best, said Mrs. Margaret when David told her he couldn't find her. Now you can move on with your life. But David couldn't move on. He thought of Sarah every day, remembering the moments they had shared and questioning if he had made a terrible mistake by letting her go. It was Martha, from the shelter, who finally gave him news of Sarah. She's okay, the woman said when David showed up at the shelter looking for information. She got a job at a private school out of state. She's starting over far from here. And her daughter? The custody case? She had to give it up for now, said Martha sadly. Without resources and without support, She couldn't keep fighting in court. David felt a pang of guilt in his chest. Did she leave any message for me? She did, said Martha, handing him an envelope. With trembling hands, David opened the letter. David, thank you for giving me a chance when no one else would. Thank you for believing in me, even if it was only for a short time. You helped me remember I am more than my past mistakes. I don't blame you for doubting me. The documents your family showed are real. I really did all those terrible things. The difference is, I'm not that person anymore. I'm going far away because I need to start over without ghosts from the past haunting me. Maybe one day I'll be strong enough to fight for my daughter again. Maybe one day I'll be worthy of the love you were willing to offer me. Be happy, David. You deserve all the happiness in the world. With love, Sarah. David read and reread the letter several times, feeling his heart break a little more with each word. He had lost the most extraordinary woman he had ever known because of his fear and his family's pressure. In the following months, David tried to return to his normal routine, but nothing seemed to have the same meaning. His work, which had once completely absorbed him, now felt empty and purposeless. Social gatherings with family and friends were torture, as they constantly reminded him of how cowardly he had been. How you're different, observed Jennifer during a family dinner. Quieter. I'm fine, David lied. Are you still thinking about that woman? Asked Mrs. Margaret. David didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. David, it was the right thing to do, said his mother. You saved yourself from a very complicated situation. Save myself from what? From being happy? David exploded. From having someone who actually cared about me, not my bank account or social status. Son, you're being dramatic, said Mrs. Margaret. No, you're the ones who are prejudiced, David retorted. Sarah may have made mistakes in the past, but she was trying to redeem herself, and I abandoned her at the first sign of difficulty. You did what any sensible person would do, said Jennifer. I did what cowardly people do, David corrected, and now I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. 6 months after Sarah's departure, David received an unexpected call. It was Martha from the homeless shelter. Mr. David, I need to speak with you. It's about Sarah. David's heart raced. What happened? Is she okay? Can I see you today? It's better if we talk in person. David cancelled all his appointments for the day and rushed to the shelter. Martha greeted him with a worried expression. Sarah is in trouble, she said without preamble. What kind of trouble? Her daughter showed up here looking for her. It seems she ran away from home. Ran away? Why? The situation with her father has gotten much worse. He started drinking heavily after he lost his job, and he's been taking his frustration out on the girl. David felt anger boiling inside him. Is he abusing her? Not physically, from what she said, but psychologically. The girl is destroyed. And where is Sarah now? Natalie managed to get the address of the school where her mother works. She's going there by bus. But the money she had only covered the one-way ticket. David didn't hesitate. What's the school's address? Mr. David, I'm not sure if that's a good idea. Martha, that woman was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I let her slip away because of fear and prejudice. I'm not going to let her face this alone. Martha smiled for the first time since they had started talking. The school is in Philadelphia, St. Jude's Academy. David left the shelter and went straight to the airport. During the entire flight to Philadelphia, he kept imagining what it would be like to see Sarah again, if she would forgive him, if there was still a chance for them. When he arrived at St. Jude's Academy, it was late afternoon. He asked at the front desk for Sarah and was told she was in the library, where she worked part-time in addition to teaching. David found her organizing books on a high shelf. She was thinner than he remembered, but her hair was well kept and she wore simple yet appropriate clothes. When she turned and saw him, she almost dropped the books she was holding. "David?" she whispered, as if she couldn't believe her eyes. "Hi, Sarah." They looked at each other for a long moment, not knowing what to say. "What are you doing here?" she finally asked. "Martha called me. She told me about Natalie." Sarah's face contorted with pain. She came looking for me. She arrived this morning." "And how is she?" Destroyed, whispered Sarah, tears in her eyes. Robert is drinking, yelling at her, blaming her for all his life's problems. Where is she now? In my room. She's sleeping, exhausted from the trip. David approached her. How are you? Surviving, said Sarah, trying to smile. The work here is good. The principal is an understanding woman who gave me a chance. And have you been happy? Sarah hesitated. I've had peace. It's not the same as happiness, but it's enough. Sarah, No, she interrupted. We have nothing to talk about, David. You made your choice. It was the wrong choice, he said with conviction. It was the choice that made sense at the time. No, it was the coward's choice, and I regret it every day. Sarah studied him for a moment. Why did you come here, David? To ease your conscience. I came because I still love you, he said simply. The words hung in the air between them like a long-contained confession. You don't love me, Sarah finally said. You love the idea of me, the romantic version of a woman who overcame adversity. That's not true. Yes, it is, because when you found out who I really was with all my flaws and mistakes, you ran away. David couldn't deny it, because she was right. You're right, he admitted. But I've learned that a person isn't defined by the worst moments of their life. They're defined by how they get back up after falling. And how long will this wisdom last? Asked Sarah. Until the next time your family finds out something about my past they don't like. There won't be a next time, said David, because this time I won't let anyone pull me away from you. It's easy to say that now, murmured Sarah. Then let me prove it. How? Let me help with Natalie. Let me be here for both of you. David, you don't even know my daughter. But I want to. I want to be part of your lives if you'll let me. Sarah was silent for a long time. Natalie is very hurt, she finally said. It will take time for her to trust any male figure again. I have time. And your family, your job, your life in New York City. None of that matters if I don't have you. David. Sarah, please, give me a second chance. I promise I won't let you down this time. Sarah looked at him with eyes full of pain and hope. I don't know if I can risk my heart again, she whispered. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't sure of my feelings, said David. These months without you have taught me that I'd rather face 1,000 difficulties by your side than live an easy life without you. And if it doesn't work, and if we find out we're incompatible after all, then at least we'll have tried, for real this time. Sarah took a deep breath. I want you to meet Natalie first, she finally said. If she doesn't accept you, there's no way it can work. Of course. When? Now. She's awake. David followed Sarah to a small building behind the school, where the on-site staff rooms were. Sarah's room was small, but cozy, with a single bed, a study desk, and a bookshelf. Natalie was sitting on the bed, hugging her knees. She was a younger version of Sarah, with the same dark eyes and brown hair, but there was a deep sadness in her expression that broke David's heart. Natalie, this is David, Sarah introduced gently. A friend of mine from New York City. Hi, said Natalie timidly. It's nice to meet you, Natalie, said David, keeping a respectful distance. Your mother talks about you a lot. She does? Natalie looked surprised at Sarah. Every day, Sarah confirmed, sitting next to her daughter. I thought you had forgotten, whispered Natalie. Never, said Sarah, hugging her daughter. Not a single day goes by that I don't think of you. David watched the reunion between mother and daughter with a lump in his throat. During all those months, Sarah had carried the pain of being separated from her daughter, and he hadn't realized how deep that suffering was. Why didn't you come back to get me? Asked Natalie. Because I wanted to be sure I was well enough to take proper care of you, explained Sarah. I didn't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. And are you? Well enough, I mean. I'm better, but I'm still learning to be the mother you deserve. Natalie snuggled closer into her mother's embrace. Dad started drinking again, she said in a small voice. He yells at me, says it's my fault he lost his job. David felt the anger boil again, but kept his composure. It's not your fault, said Sarah firmly. Nothing that's happening is your fault. He said if you hadn't ruined our family, none of this would have happened. Natalie, look at me, said Sarah, lifting her daughter's face. I made mistakes, yes, terrible mistakes that hurt you and your father. But the choices he's making now are his responsibility, not yours and not mine. I'm scared to go back home, admitted Natalie. You're not going back, said Sarah with determination. But the custody... We'll fight to change that. Again, if necessary. David stepped forward. I can help with that, he offered. I know lawyers who specialize in family law. Natalie looked at him curiously. Why? You don't even know me. Because your mother is important to me, said David simply. And anyone important to her is important to me too. Natalie studied his face for a moment. Do you like my mother? Very much. Like a boyfriend? David looked at Sarah before answering. I'd like to, if she'll let me. And you won't make her cry like my dad did. The teenager's direct and honest question touched David deeply. I'll do everything I can to make her happy, he promised. Natalie nodded slowly. Okay. But if you make my mother cry, I'll be very angry with you. David smiled. That's fair. During the following days, David stayed in Philadelphia helping Sarah and Natalie get organized. He rented a room in a nearby hotel and spent most of his time with them, getting to know Sarah's daughter better and rediscovering the woman he had fallen in love with. Natalie, initially reserved, gradually began to open up to David. She discovered he was patient, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know her as a person, not just as Sarah's daughter. David, Natalie called one night when the three of them were having dinner at a simple local pizzeria. Yes? Are you rich? Natalie, Sarah scolded. No, it's all right, said David. Yes, I'm financially comfortable. And that won't be a problem? Asked Natalie. I mean, my mother and I don't have money. Money isn't what attracts me to your mother, said David. What is then? David looked at Sarah. Her strength, her kindness, the way she never gives up on the people she loves. Even when they give up on her? Asked Natalie, and David realized the question was deeper than it seemed. Especially when they give up on her, he replied. Natalie smiled for the first time since she had arrived. I think you can stay. That night, after Natalie went to sleep, David and Sarah finally had an honest conversation about the future. It won't be easy, said Sarah. Natalie has deep emotional scars. It will take time for her to fully recover. I know, said David, and I'm prepared for that. And your family, your business? My company can run with my partial involvement. I can work remotely most of the time and go back to New York City only when necessary. You would do that? I would do anything to stay close to you. Sarah studied him for a moment. You've changed. How so? A few months ago, your whole life revolved around work and success. Now you're willing to drop everything to stay in a small city, taking care of a woman with a complicated past and her traumatized daughter. David smiled. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what really matters. What if your family cuts ties with you? Then they never truly loved me, said David. Real love doesn't come with conditions. Sarah moved closer to him. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of falling for you again and discovering this is all just a romantic phase that will pass. David took her hands. It's not a phase, Sarah. It's a choice I make every day. The choice to be with you not despite your imperfections, but including them. What if I disappoint you again? Then we'll talk about it and find a solution together. I won't run away at the first sign of trouble. Sarah took a deep breath. Okay, let's try again. But this time, promise you'll talk to me before believing what other people say about me. I promise, said David, sealing the promise with a gentle kiss. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the following weeks, David settled in Philadelphia. He rented a small but comfortable house where Sarah and Natalie could move in, giving them space and privacy as they built their new family dynamic. The process to regain custody of Natalie began officially, with David covering the legal costs and providing the best lawyers available. The first hearings were tense, with Robert trying to argue that Sarah was an unfit mother due to her past. "He's different," observed Natalie after one of the meetings at the courthouse. "Thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, and he smelled like alcohol." "That doesn't make me happy," said Sarah. "Despite everything, he's your father." "Do you still care about him?" asked Natalie. "I care about anyone who is suffering," replied Sarah, "but it's not love, it's compassion." David watched these conversations with growing admiration for how Sarah handled the complex situation. She showed no anger or desire for revenge against her ex-husband, only sadness at seeing him self-destruct. During this period, the relationship between David and Natalie also deepened. He helped her with her studies, took her out on weekends, and, most importantly, listened when she needed to talk about her anxieties and fears. "Can I ask you a personal question?" said Natalie one day when they were alone waiting for Sarah to get off work. "Of course." "Do you really love my mom, or are you with her out of pity?" David was surprised by the frankness of the question. "Why do you ask that?" "Because I've seen people pretend to like us out of pity, and it always ends badly." "Natalie, look at me," said David. "Your mother is the bravest woman I've ever known. She could have given up when she lost everything, but she didn't. She could have turned against the world when she lost custody of you, but instead she worked to become a better person. And that makes you love her. That makes me admire her. The love came because, on top of all that strength, she has an enormous heart. I saw her taking care of stray dogs when she barely had food for herself. I saw her worrying about strangers on the street. I saw her crying for you every night." Natalie was quiet for a moment. "She cried for me?" "Every night. She wondered if you were okay, if you were happy, if you missed her." "I did," admitted Natalie in a small voice. "Even when I was mad at her, I missed her. And now I'm afraid all of this is too good to be true," confessed Natalie. "I'm afraid you'll break up and I'll lose my mom again." David knelt in front of her, coming down to her eye level. "Natalie, I can't promise that your mother and I will never have problems. All couples do. But I can promise that, whatever happens between us, I will never let you be without your mother again." "How can you promise that?" "Because your happiness is part of her happiness, and I want her to be happy above all else." Natalie nodded slowly. "Okay, I trust you." Natalie's trust was an important milestone in David's relationship with the family. From that moment on, he realized he had been truly accepted not just as Sarah's boyfriend, but as a potential father figure for Natalie. The court case continued to progress, and evidence was piling up in Sarah's favor. Robert had lost several jobs in a row due to alcoholism, had been reported by neighbors for disturbing the peace, and Natalie had given detailed testimony about the conditions she lived in. "The lawyer said we have a good chance," Sarah told David after one of the hearings. "The judge seems inclined to reverse the previous decision. How do you feel about that? Relieved? Anxious? Guilty?" "Guilty why?" "For Robert. Seeing the state he's in. I know it's not my responsibility, but I can't help thinking that if I had handled our problems better back then—" "Sarah," David gently interrupted, "you can't hold yourself responsible for the choices he's making now, just as he can't blame you for his current problems." "I know. Rationally. But in my heart, in your heart, you are a person who cares too much about others. It's one of the things I love most about you." Sarah smiled sadly. "Sometimes I think it would be easier if I were more selfish. If you were more selfish, you wouldn't be you, and I wouldn't have fallen in love." 3 months after David arrived in Philadelphia, the court decision finally came. Sarah had regained full custody of Natalie, with Robert only having the right to supervised visits every other week. Natalie's first reaction was pure relief. She hugged her mother and cried as she hadn't in years, releasing all the tension and fear she had accumulated over the past few months. "It's over," Sarah whispered, stroking her daughter's hair. "It's over, my love. No one will separate us again." David watched the scene with misty eyes, realizing he was witnessing not just the reunion of a family, but the beginning of a new phase in all their lives. "And now?" asked Natalie when she finally calmed down. "Now we're going to live," said Sarah. "We're going to be a real family. The 3 of us, asked Natalie, looking at David. David looked at Sarah, seeking her approval before answering. "If your mother wants to," he said. "We want to," Sarah replied without hesitation. That night, after Natalie went to sleep, David and Sarah sat in the backyard of the house, looking at the stars and planning the future. "There's something I need to ask you," said David. "What?" He knelt before her, taking from his pocket the same little velvet box he had offered almost a year ago in Union Square. "Sarah Anderson, will you marry me?" This time Sarah did not cover her face. Instead, she smiled through her tears. "Yes," she said, "I will." David placed the ring on her finger, and they kissed under the starry sky of the countryside, knowing they had found not only love but a complete family. "David," Sarah called after a few minutes. "Yes?" "Thank you for not giving up on me." "Thank you for giving me a second chance," he replied. "Do you think your family will accept our marriage?" David thought for a moment. "Honestly, I don't know, but I know that if they don't, the loss will be theirs. And you'd be okay with that?" "I'd be sad, but I'd be okay, because now I have a new family. A family I chose, and that chose me too." Sarah nestled into his arms. "I love you, David. I love you too, Sarah. Forever." 3 months later, David and Sarah were married in a simple but moving ceremony at the downtown church in Philadelphia. Natalie was the maid of honor, radiant in a light blue dress that David had insisted on buying for her. To everyone's surprise, Mrs. Margaret and Jennifer showed up at the wedding. After months of not speaking to David, his mother had sought out Martha in New York City, wanting to better understand the woman who had won her son's heart. Martha told Mrs. Margaret about the months Sarah had lived in the homeless shelter, about her struggle to stay sober, about the unconditional love she showed others, even when she had nothing for herself. "I realized I had misjudged the situation," admitted Mrs. Margaret to David on the eve of the wedding. "Your Sarah is an exceptional woman." "She is," agreed David, "and thank you for being here." "Family is family," said Mrs. Margaret, "and if she makes you happy, then she's part of our family too." The wedding was followed by a simple reception in the hall of the school where Sarah worked. There were no luxuries or extravagances, but there was something far more valuable: genuine love and the promise of a future built together. During the reception, Natalie stepped onto the small makeshift stage and asked for everyone's attention. "I want to say something," she said, visibly nervous. "A few months ago, I didn't believe in happy endings. I thought my family was destroyed forever." She looked at Sarah and David. "But you showed me that sometimes you have to go through the darkness to find the light. Mom, thank you for never giving up on me even when I gave up on you. And David, thank you for giving us a chance to be a family again." There wasn't a dry eye in the hall. "I promise I'll be the best daughter I can be for both of you," Natalie continued, "and I'll make you proud of me." Sarah and David rushed to hug her, and the three of them stood there in the middle of the dance floor, embracing and crying with happiness. 2 years after the wedding, the family's life had completely stabilized. Sarah had been promoted to academic coordinator at the school. Natalie was in her senior year of high school with excellent grades and plans to study psychology, and David had managed to balance his business with family life. They moved to a bigger house still in Philadelphia, where Natalie had her own room and space to study, and where they regularly received visits from Mrs. Margaret and Jennifer, who had become genuinely affectionate towards Sarah and Natalie. Robert continued with his supervised bi-weekly visits, but he had managed to stay sober for over a year and was slowly rebuilding a healthy relationship with his daughter. He never formally apologized to Sarah for the years of manipulation and blame, but he also no longer caused problems for the family. "Sometimes I still can't believe all of this is real," Sarah said one morning, having coffee with David while Natalie got ready for school. "What? The happiness? The second chance? The possibility of starting over when everything seemed lost?" David took her hand across the table. "You were never lost. You just went through a rough patch. But if you hadn't shown up in the square that day, someone else would have," David said with conviction. "People like you always find a way back to the light." "Do you really believe that?" "I do, because true kindness always finds a way to be rewarded." Natalie appeared in the kitchen, already in her school uniform. "Good morning, family," she said, giving them both kisses. "Good morning, sweetheart," said Sarah. "Did you have breakfast? I'll eat at school. I'm running late." "Do you need money?" asked David. "No, I'm fine. See you later." And she ran out, leaving behind the scent of youthful perfume and the sound of her laughter. "She's so different," observed Sarah. "How so?" "Confident, happy. She doesn't have that constant fear in her eyes anymore." "That's what stability does for a child," said David. "She knows she has a safe home to return to every day." "We did it," whispered Sarah, almost to herself. "Did what?" "Become a family, a real family." David got up and went to her, wrapping her in his arms. "I never doubted we would." "Liar," laughed Sarah. "There were times you had doubts." "I had doubts about myself," admitted David. "About whether I could be the man you both deserved. But I never had doubts about you, and now I know I'm the luckiest man in the world." Sarah snuggled into his arms. "I love our life," she said. "Me too. Even though it's not the life you planned?" "It's better than any life I could have planned," replied David, "because it's real. It's full of real love." That afternoon, when Natalie came home from school, she brought news that would once again change the family's dynamic. "I have something to tell you," she said during dinner. "What is it?" asked Sarah. "I got a full scholarship offer to study psychology at Columbia University." David and Sarah looked at each other, surprised. "That's wonderful," exclaimed Sarah. "But how?" "My English teacher enrolled me in a scholarship program for teachers' children. Apparently my grades and essays caught their attention." "Natalie, that's fantastic," said David. "You deserve every opportunity." "But it means I'll have to move to New York City," said Natalie, with a mix of excitement and worry in her voice. "So what?" said Sarah. "It's an amazing opportunity. But I'll be far from you. What if I can't adjust? What if I'm not good enough?" David leaned toward her. "Natalie, look at everything you've already overcome in life. If you manage to get through all that and come out stronger, you can face any challenge." "And we'll always be here to support you," added Sarah, "no matter the distance." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," said Sarah. "Your future is the most important thing to us." Natalie smiled, but David noticed a shadow of worry in her eyes. "Is there something else?" he asked. Natalie hesitated. "It's just... I'm going to miss you so much. For the first time in my life I have a real family, and now I have to leave." "You're not leaving," said Sarah firmly, "and you're growing. It's different. And besides," added David, "New York City is where I'm from. I know the city like the back of my hand. I can help you get oriented there." "Really?" "Of course, and my mother would love to have you nearby. She always complains she doesn't see you two enough." Natalie laughed. "Mrs. Margaret is funny. At first I was scared of her, but now I really like her." "She adores you," said David. "You two are the daughters-in-law she never had." "And you, Mom?" asked Natalie. "How do you feel about me leaving?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Proud, anxious, sad, happy. All at the same time," she admitted, "but mostly proud. You are an amazing young woman, and the world needs what you have to offer." "Thank you for supporting me," said Natalie with tears in her eyes. "That's what mothers are for," smiled Sarah. In the following months, the family prepared for Natalie's move to New York City. David helped her find a shared apartment near the university, while Sarah prepared her emotionally for the challenges of college life. "There are a few things I need to tell you before you go," said Sarah during one of their last conversations before the move. "I'm listening." "First, never forget where you came from. Not out of shame, but out of pride. Your story is part of what made you strong." "I understand." "Second, if you need anything at all, call us. Don't be ashamed to ask for help. I promise." "And third," Sarah paused, clearly emotional, "never forget that you are loved, unconditionally." Natalie hugged her mother. "I'll never forget, and I'll never forget that you never gave up on me." "I would never give up," whispered Sarah. "You are my life." The day of Natalie's departure was emotional for the whole family. Mrs. Margaret made a point of being there to welcome the new granddaughter in New York City, and even Jennifer had prepared a welcome basket. Take care of yourselves, said Natalie, hugging David and Sarah at the bus station. You take care, replied David. And remember, any problem, no matter how small, you call me. I will call, promised Natalie. And study hard, added Sarah, but also have fun. Enjoy this phase of your life. I will enjoy it, and I'll make you proud of me. We already are proud, said David, every day. When the bus departed, Sarah wept copiously in David's arms. She'll be fine, he murmured, stroking her hair. I know. It's hard to let go. It's part of love. Loving someone means wanting that person to fly, even if it means flying away from us. When did you get so wise? Asked Sarah, smiling through her tears. Since I fell in love with you, answered David. With Natalie in New York City, David and Sarah had to relearn how to live as a couple without children at home. It was a period of mutual rediscovery and an even greater deepening of their relationship. Sometimes I feel like we're starting all over again, said Sarah one night as they were dining alone. In a sense we are, agreed David. It's the first time we've had time just for us since we got married. And how do you feel about that? Excited, admitted David. I love Natalie as if she were my own daughter, but I also love having you all to myself sometimes. David Sterling, you are a terrible man, laughed Sarah. Why? Because after 4 years together, you can still make me feel like a lovesick teenager. That's the plan, smiled David, pulling her into his arms. Natalie adapted well to university life, calling home at least 3 times a week to tell them about her classes, new friends and discoveries. Her reports filled David and Sarah with pride and joy. I think I chose the right major, she said during one of the calls. I love studying human behavior and how to help people who have been through trauma. I'm sure you'll be an excellent psychologist, said Sarah. I hope one day I can help other families like you helped me, replied Natalie. 2 years after Natalie started college, David surprised Sarah with an unexpected proposal. How about we adopt a child? He said one Sunday morning out of the blue. What? Sarah almost dropped her coffee cup. A child. There are so many children in homeless shelters needing a family. David, we haven't talked about this. I know. It's just an idea. But thinking about how Natalie blossomed when she had a stable home, I wonder how many other children could benefit from the love we have to offer. Sarah was silent for a long moment. It's a beautiful idea, she said finally. But are you sure? It's not a decision to make on impulse. I'm not talking about doing it tomorrow, clarified David, but perhaps we could seriously consider it. What if the child has problems, trauma, difficulty adjusting? Then we'll do as we did with Natalie, David replied simply. We'll be patient. We'll offer love and professional support when necessary. You've really thought this through. I've been thinking about it for months. Ever since Natalie left, the house is too quiet. Sarah smiled. Miss having a teenager grumbling around the house. I miss having someone to care for, to teach, to watch grow up. What if we talk to Natalie about this first? Good idea. After all, she would be the big sister. When they told Natalie about the possibility of adopting a child, her reaction was immediately positive. I think it's amazing, she said via video call. I always wanted to have a brother or sister. Are you sure? Asked Sarah. It would be a big change for all of us. I'm sure. You saved me when I needed it most. It's only fair you do the same for another child. And you wouldn't feel left out? Asked David. Of course not, laughed Natalie. I'm 20, I'm in college, building my own life. It's time for you to help someone else. With Natalie's approval, David and Sarah began the adoption process. It was long and bureaucratic, involving psychological evaluations, home visits, and lots of paperwork to fill out. Sometimes I wonder if having a biological child wouldn't be easier, sighed Sarah after another afternoon filling out forms. It probably would, agreed David, but it wouldn't make as much sense for us. How so? We both know what it's like to be rejected, abandoned, judged. We can offer an adopted child something that perhaps other parents couldn't, the understanding that the past doesn't define the future. When did you get so wise? Asked Sarah for the second time in a few years. Since I fell in love with you, repeated David the answer. 18 months after starting the process, they received a call that would once again change their lives. "We have a child for you," said the social worker. "He's an 8-year-old boy, Leo." "Tell us about him," asked Sarah. "It's a complicated story," warned the social worker. "His parents died in a car accident 2 years ago. He lived with his grandmother until she became seriously ill. He's been at the homeless shelter for 6 months. And how is he handling all this? With difficulty. He's an intelligent and affectionate child, but obviously traumatized by the losses. He has nightmares, difficulties in school, episodes of anger." David and Sarah looked at each other. "Can we meet him?" asked David. "Of course." "How about tomorrow morning?" The next day they drove to the shelter where Leo was staying temporarily. It was a well-kept but institutional place, lacking the warmth of a true home. Leo was a small boy for his age, with messy dark hair and big brown eyes that seemed to hold too much sadness for a child. When he saw them arriving, he hid behind one of the caregivers. "Leo, these are David and Sarah," said the caregiver gently. "They came to meet you." "Hi, Leo," said Sarah, kneeling to be at his level. "Nice to meet you." The boy didn't answer, just watched them cautiously. "Do you like baseball?" asked David, noticing a ball in the shelter's yard. Leo nodded timidly. "What's your team?" "The Yankees," murmured Leo, speaking for the first time. "Ah, a rival of my team then," smiled David. "I'm a Red Sox fan." For the first time, Leo showed something like a smile. "The Red Sox are bad," he said, still shy but with a hint of teasing. "Hey," protested David in a playful tone, "we're going to have to talk about that." During the visit, they spent 2 hours talking with Leo, playing in the yard and getting to know his personality. Despite the initial shyness, he showed himself to be a curious and intelligent child, with a sense of humor that appeared in flashes. "What did you think of him?" asked David, as they were driving back home. "He's perfect," said Sarah without hesitation, "even with all the difficulties the social worker mentioned, especially because of them. He needs us, David. He needs a family that understands healing takes time. So we'll take him home?" "If he wants to come with us," corrected Sarah. "The choice has to be his too." It took 3 months of regular visits before Leo felt comfortable enough to agree to go live with David and Sarah. During that period, they patiently built a relationship of trust with him, respecting his pace and his needs. "Are you sure you want me?" Leo asked on the day he officially moved into their home. "Absolutely," Sarah replied. "We really want you to be part of our family." "And if I do something wrong, will you send me away?" David knelt down in front of him. "Leo, look at me. Family isn't about never making mistakes. It's about having people who love you even when you do make mistakes. Promise?" "I promise. Nothing you do will make us stop loving you." Leo nodded, but David could tell it would take time for the boy to truly believe those words. The first months with Leo at home were challenging. He had frequent nightmares, difficulties at his new school, and occasional outbursts of anger when he felt emotionally overwhelmed. "I can't take it anymore," he shouted one afternoon after an argument about homework. "I want to go back to the shelter." "No," said Sarah calmly. "You're not going back anywhere. This is your home now." "You don't understand me," cried Leo. "We understand more than you think," said David, sitting down beside him. "You know, Sarah went through hard times in life too. She also felt lost and alone." "Really?" Leo looked at Sarah with curiosity. "It's true," Sarah confirmed. "And David helped me understand that having a family means having people who stay by your side even when things get tough." "Even when I yell and get mad?" "Especially when you yell and get mad," said David. "Because that's when you most need to know that we love you." Gradually, with a lot of love, patience, and help from psychologists specializing in childhood trauma, Leo began to adapt to his new life. His grades improved, the nightmares lessened, and he began to develop hobbies and friendships. "Can I call you Mom?" he asked Sarah 6 months after moving in. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. "Of course you can, sweetheart." "And can you be my dad?" he asked David. "It would be an honor," David replied, hugging the boy. When Natalie came home for the end-of-year holidays, she found the family transformed. Leo had become a more confident and happy child, and the house was full of the energy and joy a child brings. "How does it feel being a big sister?" David asked Natalie. "It's amazing," she replied, watching Leo play in the backyard. "He's such a sweetheart." "And you don't feel replaced?" "Of course not," Natalie laughed. "I'm 22, David. It was time for you two to have another kid to spoil." "We don't spoil anyone," Sarah protested. "Liar," said Natalie, winking, "but you spoil them the right way." That night during dinner, Leo made an announcement that deeply touched the whole family. "I want to change my last name," he said. "To what?" asked David. "To Sterling. I want to have the same last name as you." "Are you sure?" asked Sarah. "It's an important decision." "I'm sure. You're my real family now." David had to get up from the table to avoid crying in front of the boy. "Of course we can arrange that," said Sarah, also moved. "Leo Sterling, it has a nice ring to it." "And I'll be Natalie Sterling too," announced Natalie. "I was already thinking about changing it anyway." "Are you sure?" asked David, returning to the table. "Absolutely sure," replied Leo and Natalie in unison. "Then let's officially be a complete family," said Sarah, raising her glass of water in a toast. "To the Sterling family." "To the Sterling family," everyone repeated. 2 years later, the family was completely settled. Leo, now 10 years old, was an exemplary student, played soccer on the school team, and had developed a passion for books that made Sarah overflow with pride. Natalie was in her final year of college, with plans to specialize in family therapy, inspired by her own experience of family reconstruction. "I want to help other families like ours," she explained. "Families that form in unconventional ways, but are united by love." "You're going to be an amazing psychologist," said David. "I hope to follow the example you set for me," Natalie replied. One Sunday morning, while Leo played in the backyard and Natalie studied in her room, David and Sarah sat on the couch to have coffee and read the newspaper, as they did every weekend. "Remember when we met?" David asked suddenly. "Of course. How could I forget?" Sarah smiled. "You knelt down in front of me in the middle of the square and proposed, and you ran away." "Because I thought you were crazy," laughed Sarah. "And you were right. I was crazy. Crazy about you. And still are. More than ever." Sarah snuggled up beside him. "Sometimes I wonder what our life would be like if you hadn't shown up that day." "I don't like to think about that," said David. "Why?" "Because I can't imagine a life without you and the kids. You are my whole world. Even with all the difficulties we've been through?" "Especially because of them," said David. "The difficulties made us stronger, taught us to value what we have." "You're right," Sarah agreed. "If our journey had been easy, maybe we wouldn't appreciate our current happiness so much." "Exactly. And besides, our story proves that it's never too late to start over, never too late to find love." "And that people can change," added Sarah. "That past mistakes don't determine the future." Leo appeared in the living room, sweaty from playing. "Can I have some juice?" he asked. "Of course, sweetie," said Sarah. "It's in the fridge." "Thanks, Mom," said Leo, giving her a little kiss on the head before heading to the kitchen. "Mom," Sarah repeated softly when he left. "I still get emotional when he calls me that." "And I do when he calls me Dad," admitted David. "We're lucky," said Sarah. "Very lucky." "David?" "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For giving me a second chance, for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself." "Thank you," David replied, "for teaching me what really matters in life." "And what really matters?" David looked around the house, listening to the sounds of his family. Leo humming in the kitchen, Natalie typing on her computer, the hum of a full and loving life. "This," he said simply. "This right here. Love, family, second chances." "And third chances too," added Sarah, thinking of Leo. "And as many chances as needed," David agreed. That afternoon, the family received an unexpected visitor. It was Martha from the homeless shelter in New York City, who had decided to spend Sunday with them. "How are my boys?" she asked, hugging Leo and showering him with affection. "We're great, Grandma Martha," replied Leo, who had adopted the kind lady as his honorary grandmother. "And you, my dear?" Martha asked Sarah. "Happy?" "Happier than I ever thought possible," Sarah answered honestly. And you, David? Don't you regret falling in love with a complicated girl like this one? David laughed. Mrs. Martha, if I had known how much better my life would become, I would have fallen in love with her much sooner. It's so good to hear that, smiled Martha. You two deserve all this happiness. During dinner, Martha told stories from the homeless shelter, updated the family about other people they had met there, and filled the house with her wisdom and maternal affection. You know what the most beautiful thing about all this is? She said before leaving. What? Asked Natalie. You've proven that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice, love, commitment. Leo and Natalie weren't born into this family, but they are as much Sterlings as if they had been born here. And Sarah too, added David. She wasn't born into my family, but I can't imagine my life without her. That's right, smiled Martha. True love knows no barriers. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, David and Sarah stayed a little longer in the living room, reflecting on the day. Martha is right, said Sarah. We really have created a family based on choice and love. And it's a strong family, added David. Even with all the difficulties each of us brought, we managed to come together and create something beautiful. The kids are happy, observed Sarah. They are, and well-adjusted. Leo doesn't have nightmares anymore, his grades are excellent, and he's made several friends at school. And Natalie is graduating with honors from college, has a wonderful boyfriend, and is fulfilled with the career she chose. We did something right, said David. We did, said. And you know what makes me proudest? What? Both Natalie and Leo have learned that it's possible to overcome trauma, that it's possible to start over, that it's possible to be happy after going through hardships. And they'll carry that lesson for their whole lives, agreed David. And one day, when they start their own families, they'll pass on that unconditional love they learned here. David pulled Sarah closer to him. I love our life, he said. Me too. Even though it started in a totally unusual way. Especially because it started in an unusual way, corrected David. If it weren't for that morning in the square, none of this would exist. Sometimes I think it was fate, said Sarah. Do you believe in fate? I don't know, but I believe some people are meant to find each other regardless of the circumstances. Like us? Like us. Like us and the kids. We were 4 lost people who found each other and formed a family. A perfect family, said David. Not perfect, corrected Sarah. Real, with problems, difficulties, imperfections, but full of real love. That's true, and that's exactly why it works. They stayed a while longer, embracing on the sofa, listening to the sounds of the house, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the soft footsteps of Leo going to the bathroom, the distant murmur of the television in Natalie's room. David, Sarah called softly. No matter what the future brings, we'll be able to face it together, right? Together, confirmed David. Always together. Promise? I promise. Forever. And there in that cozy living room, surrounded by the love of their chosen family, David and Sarah knew they had found not only each other, but a true home. A place where the past did not define the present, where mistakes were forgiven, where second chances turned into new beginnings, and where unconditional love blossomed every day. The journey had begun with an unlikely proposal in a busy square. You're not ugly, you just need a chance. Marry me. And it had transformed into a story of redemption, forgiveness, family, and true love. End of story. And you, dear listener, what did you think of this story of second chances and unconditional love? Do you believe that love can truly overcome any obstacle? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to know what you think about David, Sarah, Natalie, and Leo. Don't forget to leave a like if the story touched your heart. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories like this one.